How's everybody doing today? Give me 1 minute. We'll be right back. On thought to cut on a little music. How's everybody going? Let's get it started. What's then coming on at a different time, doing some little Thursdays every now and then. So I expect the audience to be a little thin, but we're gonna make it work. You see it, Texas and a U.S. grid curtailment, power cut, SLAs, service level agreements. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. So I saw this article and I thought it was super interesting. Texas and other states are saying if you putting so much pressure on our grid, we can just cut your data center off, right? So they were like, so I think a few states are actually putting that into legislation and law. So once again, I thought that was interesting too. That I appreciate you. I haven't seen you in a while. Hopefully, you're having a great new year. Shout out to the Equalizer. Shout out to, I don't want to mess that up. Let's get up. Everybody's having a great day. So we're going to talk about this new, no. Shout out to Texas. They're always in the forefront of privacy, data, security as part of a state. And we know historically the Texas electric grid has been a piece of crap. I think about 5 years ago, the grid went down. It was in the winter. People pipes was frozen. The grid couldn't handle all the heater requests because space heaters and heat generate a lot of power. Shout out to my man Ty. So we're just gonna flow through it. Sorry about the small print. Most people know, or if you're not aware of, I used to teach for 10 years at a community college. I can't help but use slides. Shout out to my man on LinkedIn. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan L. with all the great certifications. I had the Sec Plus. I need to get that. CEAS is on my list. PMP, I think I might do a little project management as I get a little older, but thanks for joining me. I need to go check on my LinkedIn people, but let's go. So what allows on June 2025, Texas, Governor Greg Abbott signed bill SB 6 in the law giving the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ECOT, grid operator for most of the state, new authority over very large electric loads such as data centers. The key provision in this new law is mandatory curtailment of powers. That's what I put on the thumbnails. Can require data centers and other non-critical power consumers that are connected to the grid to shed the load or be disconnected during a firm load shed emergency when the grid basically is under strain. Once again, we know Texas has a horrible electric grid. And once again, there's so many data centers going up. I'm in Indiana. We probably blocked 5 data centers. I mean, so there's probably about, I want to say 10 in Indiana. I'm gonna get that exact number and talk about the state. But we're concerned about, once again, the grid getting overloaded and the peasants being without heat or AC in the winter. So I think this bill was designed obviously to help that. So the trigger threshold, new authority applies to large load, generally 75 megawatts or greater, which include many hyperscale data centers. A hyperscale data center is basically a very large data center. Interconnections and demand response program. The law pairs this mandatory authority with a voluntary demand response procurement program, under which large data loads can be compensated for reducing or shifting their electricity use or switching to a backup generator, or that's generation on request. The new grid plan rules, SB 6, also include interconnection disclosure requirements, mandatory study fees, and cost sharing rules for co-locating large load with generating plants. The measures are intended to clarify and responsible and cost for developing grid planners. Once again, these data centers are going up everywhere, and I'm concerned about, once again, the local people where these data centers, once again, if you use too much power, your data grid can go down, right? And data centers are using a ton. I guess when I first saw data centers, I just would assume they would upgrade or upgrade or build out the local electric grid that was serving that particular data center. It doesn't seem that that's happening as quickly as I thought. And the other part of that is a lot of power bills around data centers have been going up. I thought they would subsidize the power so the people around the data centers would actually have lower bills. But once again, that does not seem to be happening either. So PBO was misinformed on that. So, but let's keep going. Once again, I thought this was a very progressive law coming in for data centers. Texas has seen explosive growth in demand from data centers, crypto mining, and other major electric users. Forecast large growth from around 87 gigawatts today to roughly 138 by 2030, driven in part by these facilities. Once again, there's a grid reliability concerns during peak periods, especially in spring and fall maintenance season. When the thermal generation is offline, the grid can experience tight conditions. Large and flexible loads like data center can strain the system's balance. The bill SB 6, mandatory curtailment authority, is designed to give EGROT, which is their electric council, one or more tools to ensure electric supply and grid stability during emergencies. Demand response incentives. Alongside mandatory curtailment, the law encourages voluntary participation in this program, demand response programs, where large customers agree in advance to reduce load or operate on a backup generation in exchange for compensation. So, which I thought that was weird. You you cost us more in electric bill. You don't build out the electric grid. Um, but if you put too much pressure on our grid and use your backup generation, we got to compensate you for that. I think that should be the other way around. You should be building out the grid. Why are we paying you? Because you sucking up all the electricity for the region. So once again, I just thought that was a weird bill. I mean, let me rephrase it. I thought that was a great bill. There's a few things as our legal staff would say. We need to carve that out. We're not compensating you because you're using up too much grid. So I think we should take that out. So PBO might write a sternly worded email to them. It's like, we're not compensating you because you beating up the grid. That is incorrect. Let's keep rolling. Once again, I thought this curtailment, and there's some other states in here that's putting language in there about that curtailment. Voluntary participation versus mandatory action. The law blends both, compelling curtailment during an emergency event while offering incentives for proactively demanding response planning. Preparation for future demand. Stakeholders have voiced concerns that without greater grid flexibility and infrastructure investment and rapid build outs of data centers, and large industrial loads could make emergencies more frequent or severe. To me, that's just common sense. You building data centers too quick. You build at massive data centers, and on top of that, you're not upgrading the infrastructure. And people don't realize our electric grid is pretty fragile across the United States. There's not one federal agencies that control the electric grid. I think it was 12 individual consortiums out through the United States that handles that electric grid. So I think that's one problem. We need to get federal oversight. Then once again, we'll get federal mandates from that. Cost and planning issues. Separate utility data stories note that balancing grid costs and data center build outs incentives remain a topic of debate among utilities and cooperatives. Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of people think too much electricity uses too much water, doesn't create enough jobs, and realistically, it's costing the local residents because their electric bills are going up. So this whole data center thing, I think we definitely need to revisit that as a nation. How does Texas differs? Created oversight for large loads, once again, commonly cited as 65 megawatts, and paired with mandatory curtailment and disconnection authority during emergency conditions, plus voluntary demand response procurement path. So I guess that's what's kind of throwing me off. Is we're the state, we're the federal. We set up the requirements. We don't have to let you build a data center. So I'm trying to figure out why they're giving in all these stipulations. I mean, I think people think it's going to, bring a lot of jobs, maybe a bigger tax base inside that, but I don't think data centers bring a ton of jobs. I think you get the initial construction jobs, but once the data center gets brought up to speed, I mean, I think you have your support people in there, and you just buzzing computers the size of a football field, and they tell you if they need to be changed or not in the future. I mean, hell, we're gonna have robotics just change them out automatically. So let's keep rolling on that. It also bundles in interconnection, cost allocation, study free for reforms aimed at a rapid growth of large loads, which is AKA the data centers. What's notable is its legislation move that puts large loads in the spotlight with a clear upfront expectation, including being curtailed, rather than relying mainly on generic emergency tools. And the other part, from a GRC perspective, is a data center tells you we got 5 nines up, 6 nines uptime, or whatever. If you have curtailment language inside this data center, you can't guarantee your uptime. So if I have very special workloads in this data center, I need to be aware that they could be taken offline, right? So what's my recourse? If you telling me I got 5 nines and I'm selling that to my customers, but then you get taken offline for curtailment, are you compensating me? Because now my customers are upset, right? I might have stuff where I have to pay back because I didn't get my 5 nines or 6 nines or whatever, 7 nines of uptime, or what we agreed upon. Shout out to Regine. Thanks for joining us. So from a GRC perspective, a third-party risk management perspective, I need to know what that curtailment language is. I've been on contracts with bigger companies. If we were down more than 24 hours, and it was a network, we got to pay $10,000 an hour because our network was down. So once again, I'm putting that in contracts. So once again, what's my flow down from you to me? Flow down is you got requirements that flows down in my contracts. But then I'm signing people up on a contract that I can't control. Once again, I can't control your curtailment that you sign up with the state of Texas. So to be honest, I wouldn't be doing a data center in Texas, right? But once again, it depends on your classification of data, what type of businesses you running. But that's something, once again, as a GRC perspective, governance, risk, and compliance, and you working with legal, once again, you need to understand that because that's gonna figure out what workloads you can run, what kind of customers you can have, what kind of uptime you can validate to. There's the other region called the PJM, which is the Mid Atlantic Midwest. I think that's my region. Voluntary compensate emergency demand response for emergency loads, where end user customers reduce load during emergency time for payments. Once again, is you putting pressure on the electric grid. Why are we paying you? So I'm still confused about that. So they saying, okay, you built your data center, you causing too much electric load on our grid. So we take you offline. But now you said I got to compensate you because we took you offline. But the problem with that is you causing the problem. You the data center is causing the emergency demand on the grid. So I'm still a little confused about that. Once again, throw any questions in the chat, cybersecurity or tech. Once again, this article just was perplexing me. And once again, since I do a lot of third party risk management, I just want to get comfortable with, okay, do I need to ask about right the curtailment at a certain data center? Then what level of uptime can you guarantee me? All right, do you got historical records on how many times the grid went down? What's your thought pattern on the power uptick, winter for heat, summer AC? Right, is that going to put too much pressure on it? So they're going to take the data center I'm using offline. And once again, I just wouldn't do business in Texas. Of course, we knew Cali had their part of the curtailment. Has emergency demand response, the CPU emergency load reduction program, paying customers to reduce the load in the grid emergency. Operating procedures describe calling on interruptible loads and demand response programs with notification load time, often up to 60 minutes in procedures before escalating. If still short on supply, you can request rotating outage execution through utilities. The big difference between that and Texas, California leads heavily on program-based curtailment plus stage emergency actions, where forced outage is implemented through established emergency load shedding, not a special large load statute. So once again, one of them has a statute, one of them has more of a, I guess, legal curtailment. So then the MISO, I think that's mine really. The MISO, which is in the Midwest, has emergency procedures that includes preparing for and executing firm load shed when reserves are depleted. Again, a broad reliability tool used via member utilities and load serving entities. The big difference between that and Texas is MISO approaches procedure and operational grid emergency ops, not a large load statutory regime or regimen. And once again, the data centers is causing the problem. So why are we paying them back? See what regime said. Would cybersecurity be applicable in this case? I don't think so. Number one is cybersecurity usually covers cyber attacks or those type of things that would take you offline. Theoretically, would assume that you would be sued from a class action, or you would get fined by a big federal agency. And two, I don't think this rises to that level of emergency because it's documented in law, which you shouldn't be surprised by a law that tells you what they're going to do before it happens. And the other part about that is I'm sure data centers in these regions are going to have that in their SLA. So they're going to tell you up front in their SLAs what could happen. And since you're going to click through the SLA and accept it 9 times out of 10, I don't think your cyber insurance will cover that. And two is when you have cyber insurance, they look at your infrastructure, your security, your policies and procedure. They actually look at your security program. So this should be, once again, part of your security program. Risk assessment, this should be brought out in the risk assessment. So once again, I don't think it would be kind of like a surprise or something that you wouldn't be aware of. So that's why I don't think that would be covered on there. Shout out to Ty, shout out to Regine. I'm thinking that off the top of the head, Regine, but I'm pretty sure, once again, since it's covered, your insurance will be like, you should have been aware of this. And two is, if you have a DR set up for that level of data, if California took their data center down, you should automatically really fell over to, I think, everybody know I'm an AWS guy, Chicago data center. There's, you can fail over to the other side of the United States. So each one of those regions goes down, you would just fail over. I would once again fell over the Midwest. They don't usually have a lot of power problems. So I think as part of your natural setup for DR and for this particular thing to happen, that if they curtail their power, you should automatically fail over to a different region with a different data center. So that's why I don't believe your cybersecurity insurance will cover that regime. Great question, though. Once again, please let me put I need to put my banner up. Please review that with your legal and your tech team. That's just that's PBO's take on it. That's just PBO's take on it. You please talk to your technical and legal team on that. That's PBO. I'm gonna start interviewing lawyers on this channel. I work with a few that are excellent, so I've been working with those guys forever. So I'm used to hearing those guys talking there. But once again, that's a preconceived, once again, a legal thing. So you should already have that taken into. And now here's New York. So I'm not going to read it. Once again, New York has theirs. New England has theirs. So for me, that starts, once again, it's becoming, I guess, quite normal for these type of things to be in their data centers. Like I said, those were 4 or 5 of those that come up. New England maintains detailed procedures for their manual load shedding capability standards for OP13. Their system reliability emergencies tools not targeted at the data centers. The big difference, once again, the New England framework is a classic. Everyone is subject to emergency load shed if required, rather than singling out large loads. Now we're going to talk about, that's kind of what made me start talking about it, because once again, I do a lot of service level agreements, working with legal staff, working with the infrastructure guys, from a legal perspective and from a third party assessment, how am I going to start looking at this particular curtailment thing? To be honest, I've never heard of it. I just heard somebody talking about it, and I kind of said, what was that? So then that made me kind of start thinking about that. So my man Todd said, with the rise of data center, wouldn't they add more stress to? Oh, I agree with that. That's why I'm trying to figure out why we giving them their money back. No, I agree with you, Todd. My thing, though, I thought, and I guess I was confused, and I need to do a little more digging, is if I'm a state and I let you build a data center, part of you building that data center is upgrading my electrical structure around that data center, right? So to be able to handle that type of power. So we're going to let you build a hyperscale data center, but we're not going to upgrade the electric grid around it. So that's something I'm still perplexed about, Ty. I'm like, for me, that will be part of the enticement of you come in, this is the infrastructure I need you to handle. These are the things we need to upgrade. These are the things you need to take care of to be able to handle that data center. And by the way, the people around the data center, they need abatement on their bill, right? Because you're sucking up more power. But it seems like the states aren't doing that. So once again, I'm a little perplexed by that. So I agree with you. Once again, I believe when we do the data center, part of that is infrastructure upgrade, and part of that infrastructure upgrade is specific to the electric company. So once again, from GRC and service level agreements, I used to do these like water, so I always think in that time frame. Once again, keep throwing the questions in the chat. That was a great question. Remember, these are PBO's opinions. Let's keep rolling. Number one, SLAs or service level agreements, always on. The language is no longer defensible without carve outs. Carve out specifically what your legal staff to do is say, yeah, we're taking this out of this document. Most data centers, SLA, that's where I was talking about your 3 nines and 4 nines uptime. But grid order curtailment forces operators to tighten the exclusion. The operators must add or strengthen the force majeure. Force majeure is just an act of God. Clause explicitly meaning grid operation emergency orders, mandatory load shedding and disconnection, utility and government action exclusions, no credit language for outage caused by curtailment. Oh no, if you go down and I'm a business, you got to give me some credits. You took me offline. so that's it. So in the SLAs, you remember there's two sides. So everybody know I'm an AWS. If AWS has this, I'm saying, hey, if you take us down, you need to give us some credits. Meaning you're not charging us for some database and stuff for a couple months because you took us offline. If your SLA doesn't explicitly exclude grid order curtailment, customers may argue for credits. I'm arguing for credits, even if you have no legal ability to stay online. So that's the question. This guy's saying the cloud vendor it couldn't stay online. It wasn't his fault. Yeah, it was. You took all the power. You took all the power of the region. It's your fault. But they saying, well, it's not our fault legally because the state took us offline. So they saying, well, if the state forces offline, all your customers can't sue because it wasn't your fault. It was the state's fault. So that's why I'm saying we were talking about that earlier. You need to be able to fill over to a different region, right? So if they can't guarantee their uptime at the top, then we got to have a failover already built into a different region. Shout out to AWS. They make that, well, depending on the complexity of your org, they makes that super easy to fail over. But we know they went down about 4 or 5 months ago, and there was a long list of people that didn't fail over to another region. So we can just have that discussion. But once again, on the grid curtailment, these are the things: is force majeure clause explicitly naming grid operator emergencies, mandatory. So 2 is, and I've seen companies get an argument. What's an act of God? All right. Lightning is a flood. The company outside that was doing some electric work cut the whole grid pipeline. So what are we considering an act of God? So a lot of big companies, they name what that is from a contract standpoint. Because you, as a GRC person for a company, is you got to kind of understand this to figure out what risk you're taking or not taking. Talking about the Texas part, contracts now require curtailment accepting language. We just talked about that. The contracts increasingly reference the curtailment authority directly. New standard provisioning appear in the MSAs, master service agreements. Those are different service levels, but MSAs acknowledge that ERCOT may require mandatory curtailment. Operators cannot override those orders. Customer waivers are claimed tied to the ERCOT action. Disclosures that are AI and high performance computing, HPC workloads are not exempt. This is materially different from other regions where curtailment is mostly program-based and voluntary. But Texas are like, hey, we don't care if you run an AI, you run a high performance, trying to come up with the new drug to save people's life. If it's on a power grid and y'all hitting, it's coming down. But once again, if you interfere with an AI or HPC or some big workload that's run, some of those things run for weeks. Is that going to mess it up? Can you restart from where you at? What level of risk, once again, does there curtailment in there? Right? Are you going to come up with the new cancer drug? It was running for a year, but now you got to cut it off. Once again, as part of that, can you start and stop that job? Well, can you fail over to another region while it's running? It starts where it's from out. But once again, that's you understanding the classification of your data and the importance of that particular job, right? So it's called a BIA, business impact analysis. So you know, like, okay, this important job, we can't start and stop it. It's gonna find $1 billion drug. We can't run it in Texas then. Right? That's what it's telling you. You can't run it in Texas. Once again, we're on SLAs. Power procurement agreement, PPAs, must align with the SLAs. Many operators make a mistake of signing soft SLAs while relying on non-firm utility power. This mismatch now is a liability. What's changing in the PPA, which is the power procurement agreement, explicitly interruptible versus the firm power designation, pass through of grid curtailment risks to tenants. We were just talking about those risks. Increased use of on-site PPAs, private wire behind the meter agreements, co-location with generation assets. If your PPA allows interruptions but your SLA doesn't, you eat that outage risk. Right? So once again, when you do big contracts, Fortune 500 companies, you have multiple service level agreements. They talked about the service level agreement. Now they have one talking specifically for the power. Then you have one that's called MSA, a master service agreements. So you got to figure it's called flow down from the master. What requirements are flowing down to the PPAs and the SLAs? Or some of them conflicting, like he said, where you eating outage risks you're not aware of. But once again, that's where you get your GRC, your operations, and your legal together to kind of flesh that out, and everybody's on the same page. I've been in a few of those meetings. It's interesting, but I'm kind of eccentric in my way. It's interesting. Customer contracts differentiate from computer criticality. AI customers are pushing for tiered SLAs, and I see this a lot. Standard, subject to grid curtailment, resilient, supported by backup generation, mission critical, island or microgrid backed. So once again, what levels your data and which one of these grid, or are you signing up for a specific data center where you get a specific backup because you're paying a lot more money, right? So because they have backup generations when the power go out, but once again, if that takes it offline, what what customers are they consider critical that they're going to let them use their backup generation, right? There's certain contract. I know with AWS, you can't talk about contracts and updating them or having your legal team carve them out unless you're spending, I think it was $5 million or $3 million. I need to look that up. But yeah, you got to be spending millions for AWS to talk to you. I always call it the big boy money. You with the big boy money. Backup power representation are under scrutiny. Operators must be careful not to overpromise. Dangerous language to avoid. Full uninterrupted operation due grid outage. Generators guarantee continuity. Safer language designed to mitigate short-term duration outage. Backup systems subject to fuel maintenance and regulatory constraints. Why? Because grid order curtailment may prohibit exports or continuous generation, depending on your permits and emission rules. And two, once again, you as a GRC, you need to figure out when they start using this soft language, what does it actually mean? I like when you say full uninterrupted power operation during grid outage. That's easy for me to fight legally. You said full uninterrupted power. Hey, we were down, so obviously we didn't get none of that. Now, if you say design to mitigate short-term duration outages, and I always get on legal about this, what's the definition of short duration? Is that 4 hours? Is that a week? Is that a month? So I'm always asking to clarify. A lot of businesses don't want to clarify. I have people say, yeah, we don't want to actually put a date to it. I'm like, we need to put a date to it, right? Why? But two, if you don't, it's fine. I tell the business orders, we can't guarantee this. right? If they don't put a day in it, then they can pick the day. Hell, you can say a year is short. Legally, you could probably fight that, right? That's way out of bounds. But once again, there's some flexibility for terms they use that I never like. So I'm always asking for what does that mean? I want a day. If short term is that a week, month, 4 hours, just name it. I'm cool with it. Let's just name it. They don't legal don't like to name it. So PBO was always getting in trouble. I wouldn't say in trouble. I'm like, we need to name it. But their team said, well, because then our legal team, we got soft language, and they're like, well, if they name theirs, then we got to name ours. I'm like, well, y'all got to figure that out. But once again, some of PBO's idiosyncrasies I have. I don't, when people say stuff like this, PBO needs a day. What is short term? Liability caps and indemnities are tightening. Lower liability caps for power related outage. Explicit with this is what I hate. No indemnity for customers lost due to grid action. Strong disclaimers for AI training delays, missed inference windows, lost compute reservations, AI workloads, amplified damage. So lawyers are closing these doors early. So your liability cap is if you go down and I lose so much work and I got to pay my customers because I bid it on work because what I signed in your SLA. Remember, it had 5 nines. If I can't get to that, indemnity means I want some money. You got to reimburse me. No, indemnification means pound sand. You got to eat it. So my job is try to help the company. So I want no liability caps. They say lower end. You got to indemnify me. If I'm saying you're going to be up, you're going to be down no longer than 24 hours. And every hour after that, I got to pay 10 grand. For every 10 grand I got, I expect to be paid by you because you don't want to cost me this fine because I was going by your SLAs. But once again, that's when you got to make sure everything is lining up. But once again, as a GRC perspective and with legal, those are the things you got to come. And a lot of times too is, and I'm getting used to this. It's really not my risk. I need to tell the business owners, hey, we gonna be down more than 24 hours. We got to pay $10,000 every hour to that. If they go do because their grid's out, we're gonna have to pay that out, but they're not gonna reimburse us for that. So that's risk to the business. So the question is, what's the odds you think that's gonna happen? Once again, do we have a backup facilities that automatically fails over so we really don't care? Right? High performance computing. Once again, do you have failover? And once again, what's your liability and what's your indemnity to get paid for that if that happens? What sophisticated operators are doing now? Rewriting SLA to be grid aware, which is not cool. Let me take that back. That is cool, but you need to be aware because they're telling you we're not paying you. Once again, your power agreements, your service level agreements, your MSA, master service agreement. And once again, shout out to Regine. She was talking about that is what's your insurance language for that? Offer premium resilient SKUs instead of universal guarantees. Documenting and curtailing risk transparently. Important for regulators and judges. So that's what we were talking about is what's your risk? And 2 is as part of your risk assessment, that should be in your questionnaire to firms, right? Is there any curtailment that could happen in there? So now, I do a lot, once again, risk assessment. So from SLA and MSA, Master Service Agreement, that's one of the questions I'm going to start asking is, do you have a power curtailment agreement in there, or do you have one that's a risk in your state? Then 2 is, and I've seen this in other contracts, is if it happens, we're not going to pay you for it. You got to eat it, right? It's a boo. We're going to boo and boo. Bottom line, plain English, grid curtailment authority means data centers cannot contractually promise what the grid can legally take away. So that's big. Data centers cannot contractually promise what the grid can legally take away. Meaning I can't say I'm going to be up 99 out of times when the state can take the power away. The data center has no control over that. Now, once again, they might have some generators to keep it running, but your generators aren't that big. Um, so once again, what does that mean, and what risk is that to you and your customers? I think that's the big thing, is the big understanding you need to get. Here, I'm gonna drop the link if anybody wants to come up. I keep thinking it's Friday. I'm off. I'm off. Once again, for me, and once again, I do a lot of third-party risk assessment. Once again, I think that definitely needs to be in one of your questions, so I need to put that in my standard questionnaire. Operators that fail to update SLAs, power contract, customers' disclosure are carrying an unpriced legal risk, especially for AI tenants. Because AI tenants are building, and that stuff can be interrupted. I did another video. That's why a lot of the contractors, they make me nervous. A lot of them want to build off the nuclear power plants. So they own the nuclear power plant. They own the power out of it. Then they don't have to worry about these curtail agreements. I'm just old enough to remember 3 Mile Island. So I get nervous when people talk about using nuclear power. But I think that's one reason, because of these type of state agreements. And I guess the other thing that kind of threw me off again, once again, is when you sign up to build a data center, you should sign up to upgrade the electrical infrastructure that flows into it. Once again, compute criticality, tier different levels of service level agreements, standard, resilient, and mission critical. So you know what you're signing up and what your risk is as a particular customer of that particular data center. And I like the 3 big guys plus one: Amazon, Azure, Google. I'm not a huge Google fan, but they're definitely in the mix. And Oracle, they are always in that Fed space. So um, I guess I should have pulled up one of their service agreements and see if I have never seen curtail agreement into an agreement, to be honest. So that was kind of one that was a little new to me and a little different. So I was like, let me dig into it. Too, I kind of like to be aware of different things to look for in different agreements. If I see it now, I would kind of at least have a base understanding. Part of that base understanding is what is a curtail agreement and how a state could actually take a data center offline. I don't know if it's ever happened, to be honest. That's one thing I should have Googled. Have a state or one of those grid operators actually taking a data center offline. So once again, if you don't control the power, then how are you going to do your uptime inside your service level agreement? Because that's one thing I look up for. Certain federal agencies require a specific uptime. Then two is if you're FedRAMP, I wonder how FedRAMP is treating that, right? Because FedRAMP said this data center is appropriate to do federal work. So it'll be interesting to see if FedRAMP is looking into those particular power procurement agreements. Once again, that make sure it aligns with your SLA. Once again, just kind of me thinking about that from third-party assessment standpoint, and how would you once again from a risk standpoint, how would you document that risk? So that's something I have to think about at a high level. Obviously that'll be a risk. Probably not a high risk, because it would be certain periods of the time, once again, with heat or AC usage. So you got to think, in a year you might have it where it's really less than 20 days you would have to worry about it. Once again, if you have a DR or backup plan, you could probably put that into perspective. Hopefully, as long as it doesn't take too much to spin up and spin down. A lot of times you got to move your database to a different region, which is always interesting when that happens. So once again, what does that look? I think two, that would tell your cloud engineers and your CTO what type of architecture you need to, what type of database. Are your database automatically staying in sync between two regions? And it's not a lot of databases that do that. And most databases that do that, it's a little pricey too. Then, so once again, how do you architecting your product, or what products you're buying, and once again to be able to handle your curtailment. So once again, I'm gonna hang out a little longer. Throw your questions in there. I thought, shout out to Ty. I think we should be updating the grid when we're building big data centers. I think states should be requesting that. And shout out to Regine. I don't think your insurance will cover that. Once again, it's plainly written into the SLAs and the MSAs that these data centers are having. So you shouldn't be surprised if it gets taken out. Where I think hacking, malware, software, those are risks that should be covered because they're unplanned. This is telling you need to plan for them because we got in the contract. There's nothing in the contract said we're gonna get hacked. But once again, that's PBO's take on it. That's PBO's take on it. I'm gonna shout out my man from LinkedIn. Thank everybody for joining me. Just gonna give everybody a highlight. PBO probably gonna take a nap. He tired. Everybody knows I'm usually in the study GRC Discord causing havoc. So let's see. Can you touch on the virus? I haven't really dug into it, to be honest, Regine. I saw it. I haven't seen the rack root access cause of it, to be honest. I might do that in another video. I haven't really looked into it. For me, once again, that's part of business with those guys. They usually goes down at least once a year, especially Verizon. They usually go down like once a year, every year. So once again, I haven't looked at the root access cause of that. For me, if you're doing business and you got Verizon, right, you need to have a DR plan, disaster recovery plan, because Verizon will go down. So what's your backup plan for your organization? Usually they don't go down very long. They usually don't be down longer than 24 hours. I have Verizon. I didn't have any issues, but I heard it was in California. I can't touch on that, Regina. I haven't even looked at it. Once again, they go down once a year. So for me, it's like, it's just business with those carriers. I'd say each one of them go down. And a lot of them really are using the same networks. They just got like Cricket, I think, is on Verizon, and one of the smaller ones is on the other one. So they all kind of use the same network. But now I haven't dug in to figure out what the root access caused. What I just saw a couple memes saying, just reboot it. Reboot it and come back up. But nah, Regina, I haven't. Maybe, Regina, I'll be putting pressure on me. They'll be putting pressure on me. Once again, I just, for me, those carriers just have normal outage. I expect them to get, which I say, I expect to get 48 hours of downtime from any of those carriers, to be honest. So for me, it's, I'll check into it, Regine. For me, it's just part of doing business. That whole sell your tires been, to use Ty's term, that's been brittle forever, man. So I don't. But yeah, I'll look into it. Once again, I didn't do a root access cause of it. No, it's all good. Once again, I just think it's standard for those particular cell phone companies to go down, which is, I guess, sad of me, sad of our infrastructure. I just kind of have that in there because we always talk about it. If the cell phone goes down, the cool thing is, which is weird, we just say we would go Google Voice. A lot of times, you could go from your computer, depending on if you're on a different network. A lot of people got cable modems. You can just talk through Facebook, LinkedIn. Everybody has voice now, so we usually just pick one of those as our backup. Google usually has different backup, and you can do voice on Google. So we usually just switch over that. if we needed to do business stuff, especially in an emergency. If the cell towers go down and we're doing emergency, we just really would go to Google Voice and just link into that. LinkedIn, you can do, I think, 40 minutes for free. So once again, just figure out which backup service you want to use. I guess once again, I just expect that to go down. Once again, throw your questions in the chat. Tech or cybersecurity, we'll get to them. Come check me out Friday. We doing which I think you will like. ChatGPT is going through a FedRAMP assessment. So we're going to talk about AI doing government work. The cool thing in there, we're going to talk about what policies and procedures you need to upgrade and have your AI verbiage in there. You can have your own AI whole policies and procedures, but there's probably 6 or 7 you can stick AI and pass government review. And 2, what does that mean? Doing AI work from a federal perspective. The 2, a lot of times people don't do is small and medium sized businesses. How you doing a risk assessment on ChatGPT? How you doing a risk assessment on Cloud? How you doing a risk assessment on Gemini? What risk is your business taking on doing those AI workloads? Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what to look for into that. How do you cover yourself from a company and auditor standpoint? So because they're going to want you to kind of judge the risk on that and what that would look like. So that'll be tomorrow at Lunch and Learn. People going live a little more, trying to get his monetization back from YouTube. So you gotta have so many hours per year. You have to get it one time. It's 4,000. That's a lot of hours. I think I got like 2,700. So trying to go live a little more and give you a little more content. Once again, drop any questions in there. We're gonna probably shut it on down. PBO gonna run and take a quick nap. He's tired. I'm always tired. I was supposed to go to gym. I still ain't made it. PBO's sucking. We're gonna get it done. But here, let's go ahead and once again, I appreciate y'all for joining me. Y'all know I'm easily found. I gotta do a better job checking my email. Texas and the grid curtailment. I thought that was actually excellent by a state to actually put some parameters around because these data centers are just coming up everywhere, right? And they're not, I guess, updating the grid before they build these data centers, which I think is horrible. So what laws and things can we put in to kind of our GRC favors? We need some guardrails around these data centers. So what guardrails, and I think this grid curtailment was a good guardrail to put around that particular data center. Once again, I appreciate everybody for joining. I'm out, Professor Black Ops. Thanks for joining me. PBO about to study a little bit and take a nap. I'm out. Come and check me out